Okay guys, so today we're going to be talking about ratios. We talked about those a bit today in class, and some of you seemed a bit confused because we talked about rates at the same time. So we're just going to go through this as a sort of review to help square you guys away. So a ratio is a way of comparing two like quantities. That's it. That's all it is. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, let's go with an example. So let's go and say we had 10 cars to every scooter. So 10 cars to 5 scooters. Okay? So this is our ratio. Now, all that is it can be written as 10 to 5. It can be written as a fraction, as 10 over 5. Or it could even just be written as 10 to 5. But what exactly does that mean? Well, what it means is for every 10 car, I have 5 scooters. So that is what a ratio is. So if I were to go and try and reduce this, because what does that mean? Well, if I have 20 cars, I'm going to have 10 scooters. So if I were to try and reduce this, I would need to get my the greatest common divisor. So the greatest common divisor. That's what I would need to get. So one of the ways I could do that is if I look at 10 over 5, or 10 to 5, or 10 to 5, how could I reduce this number? What are both of these numbers divisible by? And using, prime factorization, which we saw last year, if I were to go 10 and try and break it up, well, 2 times 5 is 10. That's part of prime factorization. And if I were to try and do the same thing with 5, well, 5 is a prime number. There's nothing I can divide it by. So the greatest common divisor that these two numbers have is 5. So if I go 10 divided by 5, gives me a 2 to 1 ratio, or 2 to 1, or 2 to 1. So for every 10 cars, I have 5 scooters. Now, what if I want to know how many scooters I had to cars? Well, my ratio would be flipped for scooters to cars. So what I would do is, well, I want to know how many scooters. So if I have 10 cars to 5 scooters, my flipped ratio would be I would have 5 scooters to every 10 cars. So now I have 5 scooters to every 10 cars. Well, my ratio would be written as 5 to 10, or 5 over 10, or 5 to 10. These are all the same thing. These all mean the same thing. And again, I can reduce it just the way I did up here. So if I divide it by 5 and by 5, my ratio in this case is 1 to 2. Okay? So it's just a way of comparing like quantities. That's it. This is all a ratio is. This is it. So if I were to go now and say, alright, well, let's go and look at a different type of ratio. So what we looked at was our class. So in our class, we have 25 students. Okay, so we have 25 students in our class. And we want to figure out the ratio of boys to girls. Well, we still do. We have 15 boys in our class and 10 girls. So what we have is the ratio of boys to girls is 15 to 10, or 15 to 10, or again 15 to 10. So that's our ratio. Now again, 15 to 10 tells us our ratio of boys to girls, and 15 plus 10 gives us 25, which is our total number of students. But what if I want to reduce this and make it smaller? Well, again, I would do prime factorization. So if I go and take 15 and divide it, okay, and factor it, well, what goes into 15? If I go 3 times 5, that gives me 15. And if I factor 10, well, 2 times 5 will give me 10. So, and the greatest common divisor that they have is 5. So if I divide 15 over 10 by 5, my ratio of boys to girls, well, is 15 divided by 5 is 3, and 10 divided by 5 is 2. My ratio of boys to girls is 3 to 2. That's my ratio. And if I were to flip it, if I want to know the ratio of girls to boys, it would be 2 to 3. There are 2 girls for every 3 boys. Now what if I wanted to go and come up with another ratio? What if I want to know how many boys there were to students in the entire class? Well, if I were to go, well, there are 15 boys in the class, and 25 students, and I wanted to figure out this ratio, I would do the same thing where I would use the prime factorization to reduce this. So if I go again, 15 can be factored as 3 times 5, and 25 can be factored as 5 times 5. My greatest common divisor is 5. So if I divide by 5, whatever I do to the numerator, I have to do to the denominator, and vice versa. 15 divided by 5 is 3, so I have 3 boys, and 25 divided by 5 is 5, so I have 3 boys for every 5 students. So I hope this makes sense in how you're doing ratios. So it's just a way of comparing quantities. That's it. That's all. That is the whole thing for doing ratios. I hope this video helped and squared a couple of things away. And that's it. I'll see you guys in class. Take care.